Most people don't think about how their ancestors actually traveled across the ocean to arrive in places like Canada or the United States from places in England like Yorkshire. We usually just think, well, they left such and such a time and then arrived in Canada and started their lives. This overlooks the complexity of both the logistics and the social fracturing that has to occur in order for these big journeys to happen. In this episode of Ancestor Unlocked, we explore the Chapman family leaving Hawnby in 1774 in order to get to the port city of Hull, where their ship, the Albion, awaited. Specifically, we're going to cover the part of the trip from Hawnby to York. We'll also consider how their stop at the beautiful and ancient city of York would have affected the Chapmans, representing their last view of a major city in England and perhaps their last temptation to turn around and abort their plans. I will be showing you these sites shortly, including views around the city of York, inside and outside the York Minster Cathedral, and the ancient city walls, all views the Chapmans would have taken in before proceeding on to Hull and later on to Nova Scotia. According to weather records, it was one of the most brutal winters ever recorded up to that point. Temperatures frequently reached -20 Celsius. The snow was deep. I'm guessing the Chapmans were quite happy to leave Yorkshire given these nasty weather conditions. What they didn't know was how harrowing their journey was going to be ahead of them, and how weather was going to play a significant role in their lives for the next several months. In February and March of 1774, the roads would have varied somewhat between being snow-covered and barely passable, or alternatively being so muddy that they could barely make progress. The journey would take approximately 11 days, with stops in Helmsley and York to sell livestock. Imagine 8 children, probably upwards of 200 farm animals, that they'd be driving ahead of them to take to market either in Helmsley or in York. It was slow going. Livestock can only manage about 10 miles per day, or they'd lose weight and therefore value. The children would likely ride in a horse-drawn wagon, although they would have to disembark periodically so the horses could pull the wagon through deep mud or deep snow or up steep hills. Remember that the Chapmans had a fairly substantial farm in Newhall near Hawnby, and as part of the process of leaving Yorkshire, they would need to sell all of their livestock, including cattle, sheep, and pigs. This likely added up to several hundred animals that they would have had to herd ahead of them in order to bring them to market. They may have hired drovers to assist them, or perhaps friends and family accompanied them. Given that their most likely route would have taken them through the market town of Helmsley as well as York, they likely drove most of the animals all the way to York, where the best prices were. The pigs, however, were slow-moving, and they likely would have sold them at market in Helmsley before proceeding on to York, so they wouldn't be burdened by them. Before they left, it was traditional for families departing to say goodbye to their friends and neighbors, family members, parish members, who'd often gather to see them off. This would have been a very emotional time for everyone, and I'm sure for the Chapmans in particular. The children would be saying goodbye to their friends and family for the last time. They would likely never see these people again. They also likely did not travel alone. William Chapman's brother, Lancelot, and his family are likely co-travelers as well. And there were many other families from Bilsdale, Thirsk, and other areas of the region who were all headed to Hull for the same reason. Traveling together would allow them to help each other out, given the brutal conditions that they would have had to endure. Families like the Dobsons, the Trumans, the Atkinsons, Smiths, and many more from the surrounding area, and people who would have been well known to the Chapmans, they were all departing on the same ship, the Albion, which was set to leave March 11th, 1774, from Hull. The procession of wagons would have left New Hull probably in late February, around the 25th, in 1774. And neighbors and friends would have gathered on the road to bid farewell, and certainly there were many tears shed as they left their old life behind and started looking forward to their new one. Undoubtedly, their first stop would be the market town of Helmsley. Mary Ibbetson's mother, Joan, would have had a farm there where they could keep the animals for the night. Mary's father, Henry Ibbetson, would have died many years earlier and would not have been able to see them off. Of course, they also would want to visit with Mary's mother for the last time for a few days. The whole family would be gathering for a celebration and a bit of a period of mourning as well. They were leaving behind everyone and everything. It would be their last opportunity to say goodbye to All Saints Church in Helmsley, the ancient building where their family had worshipped for generations. The distance from Hawnby to Helmsley was a solid day's ride to get there with slow animals like pigs. After visiting family and friends in Helmsley and selling the pigs, they likely departed for Hull at the end of February. They could make better time now without those pigs. Their next stop would require them to stay at specialized inns that were located along these travel routes and were designed for large numbers of animals to be accompanied, as well as families. It was 24 miles from Helmsley to York, so they probably stayed overnight somewhere around Sutton-on-the-Forest at a drover's inn pasture. No doubt, the sight of these inns was very welcoming, given how cold and wet the families would have been from their long day on the moors traveling. In the evening, they would have a chance to have a warm meal by the hearth and to warm their bones. The parents certainly would have been trying to encourage the children by discussing the excitement of their new journey across the ocean, as well as their new life in Canada that would be starting soon. Exhausted by the long, cold day's journey, they'd probably retire early to bed. By March 2nd of 1774, the family would have arrived on the outskirts of York. They likely stored their cattle temporarily in one of these drovers' inns just outside the city, and then could proceed into the city to take care of business. They had a lot of livestock to sell. There may have been specialized goods that they could purchase in York for their trip overseas. And there would have been legal considerations as well. York was the center of all things legal in Yorkshire. They would have had to deal with the breaking of their lease to the Cavendishes and the Tancreds. They'd have to settle all of their debts before they'd be given permission to leave England. They could get letters of introduction from people that knew them. Given the size of their livestock, they would have been quite wealthy by the standards of the day. A good estimate is that they probably obtained approximately 300 pounds for their livestock. This would be a small fortune in 1774. To put that in perspective, 5 pounds would be enough to rent a small-sized farm for a year in Yorkshire. This money was more than enough to buy a large estate in Nova Scotia, build a new home, and buy lots of livestock at the other end. Moreover, they would own their farm in Nova Scotia, something they were not allowed to do in Yorkshire, where only the nobles owned the land.
We're in York in the northeast of England. York was founded almost 2,000 years ago by the Romans and has been a center of commerce, religion, and political power since that time. For the Chapmans and the Ibbotsons in 1774, York would have been a faraway place that had an influence on their lives. It definitely was some place they would visit rarely, but to get certain types of goods or to sell some of their produce, they might have to travel the 50 or so kilometers that it takes to reach York from Hawnby. York would be a place where if you had any big legal problems or something to do with a will or some other type of estate problem, you would probably have to deal with this location. Also in York was the center of religious power. So the York Minster, which we'll be visiting later, is the largest cathedral in the north of England and was the center of power for places like Hawnby. And the Chapmans would have come here occasionally for things like commerce, trading things. It was also a place you would likely send your fourth or fifth child, if those that aren't going to be inheriting anything, to learn a trade or to learn how to be a carpenter, for example, and get some experience like that. So it was definitely a place that they would have likely came for a religious experience, to see the York Minster or other churches in the area and so forth, which would have been quite ancient even in 1774. These were very ancient structures at the time.
It's fascinating to imagine what must have been going through William Chapman's head in 1774. At this time, he'd already converted to Methodism, so his ties with the Anglican Church were already largely severed. But still, you can imagine the power that this building would have over someone's mind at that time. The Chapmans were about to give all of this up. The history, the grandeur, the spiritual weight of the York Minster, the excitement and possibilities of the city of York, the hustle and bustle of the Shambles and other shopping areas. They were forsaking all of these things in exchange for a new life in an unknown and wild frontier.
This is York Minster. It's the largest cathedral in northern England. It's a very old structure built. When was it built? A very long time ago. I think it started in 1220 or something, and they didn't finish it till 1400. So it's been nearly 800 years or so as a building. It is the center of power for all religious things in the north of England. Would have controlled the parish of Hawnby and Helmsley, where the Chapmans resided. They almost certainly would have stopped in here on their trip from Hawnby to Hull in order to take a ship over to Nova Scotia. So this would have been probably a pretty impressive sight for someone coming from a small village. For anyone, really.
next episode, we follow the Chapmans to the port of Hull, where they get ready to embark on a major adventure. Like and subscribe to Ancestors Unlocked to follow this story.